things to say. One, Kiran Doel on her way, because this is Sundance, and we always someone always runs a little late, so she's going to be joining us probably a couple minutes in. With that, please allow me to introduce our panelists: Joseph, Pat, and John. Sit anywhere. Now, before we start, the guys are going to give themselves an introduction, tell you a little bit about who they are and what they do, and specifically why they are here joining us today. Joseph, by the way, I heard you had a big night last night.
Had a big night last night.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we had a premiere.
Yeah.
My name is Joseph Patel. I'm a producer and director, documentaries. What else?
You make a lot of great films, and you've won an Oscar.
Thank you. I've won an Oscar.
Really? That was the memory lapse?
Not that. It's just as it pertains to this panel, I'm a storyteller.
Hi, everybody. I'm John Cheng. I work at 3AD, and I'm a producer coming on my 30th year in Hollywood. I started off at a company called Rat Pack Entertainment, where I worked on movies such as, I always say, Rush Hour to The Revenant. After that, I partnered with Kevin Hart at Heartbeat Productions, and now I'm at my dream job, partnered with Daniel Day-Kim.
Pat?
Thank you.
We're gonna have a morning drinking contest about how many times we mentioned Daniel's name.
Daniel Day-Kim. How about that?
Oh my! Everybody.
What's the drink? Thank you. My name is Pat Shah. I run content acquisition strategy and partnerships for Audible. I'm happy to be here and join this illustrious crowd of folks and storytellers. I've been at Audible for 5 years. Really manage all of our deal teams and making sure that all of these great creative works that get done get to our store, get to customers, and make sure that they all get to benefit from all of your hard work. So.
I want to start off, Pat, by actually talking to you, because Audible is obviously literally a company that didn't exist just over a decade ago, right? And yet is now such a huge part of the media industry. So what kind of strategy do you guys employ to find the kind of stories you want to tell, to reach the diverse audiences you want to reach, and how do you incorporate that in a business model?
Yeah. Let me just put this down real quick. Yeah.
You're here! Yes! Yeah, okay. You got a mic? Here, you sit here. I'll move.
Yeah. Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Okay,
Hi.
Pat, can we just hold that thought?
Yes.
Madame, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Kiran. It's so nice to be here. I was holding a lint roller earlier, and now look at your bright, shining faces. We're doing it. Okay, so excited.
You know, every panel and every event at Sundance has to have someone running 5 minutes late because of getting around.
Thank you so much.
Win the award for the first day.
Thank you.
Sorry, Pat.
No problems. So the question was, how do we find...
How do you find the kind of stories you want to tell, look, you have a business model. You guys have heard me say this. I say it too many times. There's a reason they call this show business and not show friends. And so in that business model, there is goals. But there's also huge audiences out there that are underserved and underdeveloped. And I want to know how you guys reconcile that and for the types of stories, the types of projects you put on the platform.
Yeah, perfect. Great question. I mean, the beautiful part about Audible is that we're a paid subscription service that gives us a massive amounts of flexibility and room to explore, use our data, use of our collective experience that goes back to the late 1990s, understanding what customers want to listen to, what their interests are, what the genres that really over-index. And we take that and we enable a terrific team of creatives at Audible that sit and meet with folks like these folks here on this dais and say, what are your great stories?
Hold on, I have to make a Daniel Day-Kim reference again.
I was resisting.
It's so close, I know. So are you telling us we have a new Sunrise House deal just happened on stage?
Well, why not?
All right.
Why not? Let's talk about
Get
that.
the contract now.
We'll work on that. But it's really just working with storytellers and letting them explore their creative outlet and having the freedom to work in a subscription service that could actually underwrite that, right? It's a commercial reality of being in a paid subscription service that allows for this type of risk-taking that is very hard for other people to do. If you're in an ad-supported model, it's very difficult, right? You have to sort of figure out how you're going to grow, that audience, how you're going to monetize and all that. And our challenge is like, we have the audience already. We don't need to go find them. And now it's just feeding them and opening and expanding their mind to think about different types of stories, different types of creators, and even more in a world where the services are going global, right? It's not just a U.S. business anymore. It's or even a Western Europe business. It's a global business. And so how do we tap into that, in a creative way? And so that's the work at hand, and that's why we work with such great talented partners, because we're really saying that there's an outlet here that's not readily available to other people, and maybe not in commercial ways. To your point about that.
Joseph, you want to say?
Yeah, so I'm not plugged into the business side of this world as much, but I've always wondered like why, in baseball there's Billy Beane and Moneyball, right? And he looked for inefficiencies in the market and then exploited them, right? And I'm curious like why that thinking doesn't infect show business, right? Because what you're talking about and what we were talking about out there is there are untapped markets, untapped audiences that aren't being served.
Billions of dollars.
Yeah, and like why
Billions.
why aren't executives in the film world, in the storytelling world, why aren't they looking for inefficiencies and looking to exploit?
Well, Joseph, let me throw that back at you a little bit, because there's a nice flip side to that, which is, of course, you and Questlove, you guys work, your SLY Lives will be debuting on, yes, we can always cheer for Sly Stone, my friend. Will be debuting on Hulu, I believe, February 13th, right?
Yes.
Hulu, owned by a very large company called the Mouse House, or the Walt Disney Company, if we want to be more formal. That company has had, for many years, a very inclusive attitude. That attitude has been changing lately. So let me ask you, how do you guys get behind the wall, so to speak?
I think two things. One is, whenever Amir and I, when we did this with Summer of Soul, we did it with SLY Lives. I do this on my own. Is who's your audience, right? When you can take one idea, and we try to envision who our audience is, and that's always like our guiding light through the process. It determines what stays and what goes. Is this, and with Summer of Soul is a perfect example. We could have got super, super nerdy with it, and we didn't, because our audience was, intergenerational. It was interracial. It was sort of like we wanted this to be for as broad of an audience as possible. And so I think, we have that in mind. We want to reach a broad audience, and we try to find the sweet spot between like the real nerdy people and like the people who are just coming to the story at a surface level. But I think and that guides us through the process. But the other part of it, in all honesty, is we work with Onyx Collective, and they've been an incredible partner. Yeah. Not only in greenlighting stories, but supporting us and the choices we want to make, and having that partner on the inside to navigate the Disney ecosystem, and also as we release this movie, the media ecosystem, and finding an audience, like that's invaluable.
Yeah, John, for 380, you guys have a deal with 20th. Give me a sense of, from your point of view, what Joseph was speaking to. Because again, I guess in many ways, I want to be on this panel. I want to be with everyone. I want to be very practical for people, right? Like Daniel and Norman and Bing profoundly said, this is an inspirational, aspirational, safe place, and it should be. And there's a lot of crappy things happening in the world, so they're not happening inside these walls. But this is a business, and last year, McKinsey put out a study, the consulting company. I believe they said that the underserving of black audiences in America cost the media industry up to $19 billion. Same thing, Latino audiences, I think it was around 12 billion. Asian Pacific audiences, I believe it was around 10 to 13 billion. That's real money. That's not like, and let me tell you, the way Hollywood are cutting people's jobs and everything, $19 billion, $12 billion, $10 billion, that saves everyone's yacht, Bob Iger. So the question I have then, John, for you is like, how you guys are working on a commercial level. You have Butterfly coming out this year. How do you guys get behind that wall and say, look, these stories are important, and you need to tell them with us?
Well, first of all, at 380, our mission statement, our goal is to tell stories from people who haven't had a chance to tell their stories. That's really our goal. It all starts with those kinds of stories. Of course, we love representation, we love diversity, but we honestly don't think about that. We think about telling stories first. And coming from a film and TV background, and we have a deal with 20th, but we also have a deal with Audible. And we've been put in such a great position because, as you guys know, the market is shrinking. Studios, TV studios are all contracting, and they're not making as much. So we're always looking for what's the next platform. And working with Audible in the audio space, it's been fantastic because it's a new platform for us. Writers come to us because they're like, oh, studios aren't buying things for us. Where else can we tell our stories? And that's why it's so great to work with Audible, because it's a different way to tell a story. But at the bottom line is we get to tell our story. And yes, it's an added bonus that all of our stories come from an underrepresented group.
Yeah. And I'm just going to add something to what Joseph was saying.
You going to tell us about the deal you guys have?
No, I won't do that. But
We want the deal.
Yeah, we want the deal.
now.
Where's that contract?
I mean, I'll dig it out of my back pocket. But what Joseph
have a
was
piece of
talking
paper
about,
here,
yeah. Thank you. But the Billy Bean effect, right? Of being able to use data and how do we create good outcomes and that type of thing. And one of the things that where we're at is we're still very early in this process. These services are relatively nascent when it comes to global audiences. Global audiences then lead to data. Data then leads to these decision making and things that happen. And so it's two challenges. It's data.
Hard disagree. Data does not lead to decision making and storytelling.
What, Kiran, why do you say that?
Because that's.
Go. No, that's what.
Not in a mean way, but like that's such a tech-driven model for how you look at it. I'm a comedian. It's what I see is so much talent. I know so many Black comics, Latino comics. We are now responsible for building our audiences before someone takes you up. Would you been able to make your movie without Questlove attached? This is my question. I think there's a massive pipeline issue that's existing. It's not a talent issue. It's an issue of taking risks. It's an issue of people at the top being willing to take the risks and take the swings on the talent that is out there that exists. And when a market is contracting, the issue is that people don't want to take those risks.
Well, and Kiran, to that point, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, that McKinsey studies that were done that show billions of dollars being left on the table, essentially. So let me ask you, as one of the things about being a comedian is you're in front of people, and you look at your audiences, and you see your audiences, and you talk about that pipeline. So for you, I know that your history of developing that pipeline, by the way, you have a new special coming out.
Thank you so much.
But because I think that's like, look, goals and achievement, check boxes. It's good to get there because one leads to another. How is that pipeline from the individual point of view? How do you get, because the pipeline has to start.
I think, so this is a very interesting question that I think about a lot of times because it's like, I think about like Ali Wong, Hassan Minhaj, these people that I came up with. When they existed, there was no market proof that they had audiences. So how do you prove to people who are in a fear-based business that you have value if they lose their jobs when they take swings and fail?
Well, here's the thing that I find interesting. So over in the UK, which has a very different economic ecosystem, back in the 1990s, there was a show called Goodness Gracious Me that basically dealt with a South Asian audience. People like Nina Wadi and many others were in it. Huge audience. I mean, the BBC, I think it was on the BBC, but I might be wrong. They were like, we're going to put it on late. Hopefully not. Yeah. And it blew up, right? But it was a different ecosystem where the risk levels were different. So the reason I bring this up is to mention what you mentioned, Pat, which is you are in a different ecosystem because you're a subscriber base. That is also true of Netflix. That's to some degree true of Hulu, but it works slightly differently. So does that play a role here in the platform that you're aspiring to, or is that the way you approach it? I think if I wanted to do an interview with you,
yes,
I wouldn't talk to Joseph. I would talk to your manager. I would talk to your PR people to do an interview with you to talk about your special or something like that. So are you targeted, or do you think that's an issue too, is that people need to target where they want to be?
I feel like it's a broader concern. I think it's just a broader issue that you have. Hulu started doing stand-up specials this year. They bought 8, and they bought them at this price point that's so high. And then there's this like massive middle of people, Ali Siddiqui, like all of these incredible comics who are putting their stuff out on YouTube for free off of a data monetization model. You have to personally prove yourself in order to do that, and then maybe you get the attention of a business. The reason this is problematic is who can bankroll that?
Yeah.
who could the reason I was late is I'm staying 30 minutes away from here, even though I'm the lead in a movie, because it is too expensive to stay in Park City, And so it's like that, how
I mean,
how
that's
do you
real.
how do you bridge that gap between those two things is my question. The movie I'm in didn't die. I mean, this is the filmmaker just made it with friends, and institutionally nobody got that film. You know what I mean? And it's it's only with the support of something like a Sundance or institutional support at some point that you can actually start to get it out to broader audiences and do work that's interesting. I mean, Britain just spends less money on all of their stuff. They spend $8 and they say, do what you want, and they leave you alone. You know what I mean? So I'm curious if there's room for more of the FX model, more of the John Landgraf model, that in Audible, that in podcasting, because I'll send you 8 people today.
Please. No, and I actually, I
Nice, all right. No, I'm serious.
But we started this conversation.
This is what
about-
Sundance is all about. Sundance is fundamentally about, I hate the term networking. Barry Jenkins says, don't do it. Just hang out with people you vibe with, and he's right. But the thing is, that is a true Sundance issue, which is you guys should have that talk.
Yeah, of course.
Because it's real,
Yeah.
and you can have that discussion. And you're coming with, I got 8 people. Here's some names. Here's some, here's some.
And I hope I'm not yelling. I just
okay to yell.
I just feel
It's a
very
mountain.
I feel very passionate. I feel very passionate about artists because I know so many good ones.
Yeah.
And what I see consistently is I don't just massive pipeline issues.
It's 100%. It's 100% fact that what you're saying is true. I started my comments by talking about how a paid service allows for risk taking. Right. I was addressing the premise of his question, which was around data and Billy Bean. And I think the answer.
We're gonna have a Billy Bean drinking contest
We
here
might.
soon.
We might. But there's 2 issues, right? There's the risk taking and data tension, okay, and then there's the creative tension, which is, do we have the right people on the buy side who represent and understand the perspective of diverse voices and underrepresented communities and that type of thing. And so it starts all the way top and bottom. And actually, I remember I saw Bing earlier. Bing and I sat in Santa Monica in 2018 talking about Gold House and the idea of Gold House and how this was going to come about. And it's monetizing that collective creative talent, commercial talent, and economic power, right, to be able to drive outcomes for different types of creative projects when the data might not exist, right? And so, I mean, we did this with Yellowface, with you guys. We partnered with Gold House to take our content to market, and we partnered with them because they had the largest audience, that was appropriate for that title. And so, how do we actually work to take the titles to the customers so that then we can then create more opportunities and take more risk, right? It's all tied together.
Yeah. But I think so. What you were talking about, risk, is so real. I think everyone who works at a streamer, everybody goes to work every morning, and they're just trying not to get fired that day. Yeah. And so there's you really are looking for the one person who you're pitching your project to or supporting your project who just will take a risk, even the smallest of risks. Yeah. You asked about Summer of Soul, Questlove. Questlove got signed on as director. It still took 3 years to get financing for the film, with him attached as director, to get fully financed, which is insane in hindsight, right? And I think...
I mean, I have to say, from a point of view, it's insane, in pre-sight. You have a multi-Grammy-winning individual. You have someone who's well-versed and all, someone who's going to connect, and you have it, that to me, look, but we're just going to use the word, there's a lot of racism involved here.
It's not even racist. But even if you take that out of the equation, because I do think that is true. But even when you talk about business, right? Identity politics and people's prejudices shouldn't step on the business part of it, right? Because it is.
But it does.
It's a business. It does. But it is a business still. But I think even the people you talked about it's so there's so much pressure and responsibility on these artists to build their own audiences that even when they graduate to that next level, it's really not because of risk taking. That's someone in a corporate C-suite saying, "Oh, here's someone who already has built their audience that I can then exploit," and that's not really risk taking. So I think we could do all this stuff from the bottom up unless the model changes fundamentally. it's really the top down. Somebody at the top still needs to create an environment where risk taking happens.
I mean, that's one of Spike Lee's famous quotes, right? Is that, it's great to have representation on screen, but I need someone in an office who can greenlight.
I think that's a great point, because not to bring this back to the audio conversation, but you really need people of power representative of what we all look like. And there's a great example. We're working on a deal with Audible right now where we have a big Korean star who's going to be a producer on one of our shows. And we unfortunately couldn't make a deal with him, and he passed. The executive at Audible in business affairs is a Korean American woman. She knows how big and important this Korean star is to the project. So she had to lobby to her bosses to say, hey, this guy passed, can we go back? Even though we don't have the precedent for this, can we go back and make him a better deal? And if she wasn't Korean American and she didn't know who this actor was, they would have just passed. And so it's about putting the people in the right positions.
Well, then too, I want to bring up an issue that Pat brought up, because I think it's very important. You talked about thinking outside the domestic audience. So, Kiran, there are lots of preconceptions, and of course, it will always be the white guy who brings up racism, because it should be the white guy who brings up racism. But I will say there's also internationalism, right? And people talk about, it used to be the old thing is black movies don't sell overseas. And then Eddie Murphy was like, yeah, they do. And then Kevin Hart was like, yeah, they really do. And Dwayne Johnson and many others, yeah, they really. And Daniel Day Kim and many others, yeah, they do. And the whole Fast and the Furious franchise, right?
Love that franchise.
Hey, my name's Dominic. I gotta love that franchise. And I've got the head, right? Like, I'm waiting for Vin to say, you can be my stand-in.
It's about family. It's about
packing on the weight,
family.
my friend. But my question is, it intrigues me but comedy is different. Comedy, how does comedy travel internationally?
No, comedy's specific, but it's global. I mean, it is global. I know what you mean, because it's language-based, but I remember Tiffany.
It also is situation-based.
It's situation-based, and it's fascinating to see how it travels, because I think what comics have in common is that fundamentally the spirit of comics around the world are that they are people who, to some extent, whether it's about fart jokes or whether it's about politics, they're speaking some version of truth to power, and they want to get a message out there. And so there's a pureness, and then there's also a connection to the audience, which I think is really fun and cool. So it's like, I know that whenever I go anywhere in the world and I meet other comics, I know that there's going to be a synergy with those people, probably like when filmmakers meet each other, which is really nice. I wanted to say, my biggest thing is like, I remember like when Cord Jefferson gave that speech at the Oscars. I don't remember if you heard it. He's one of those guys who got the shot, and it's like, great, talented, amazing person. And he goes, more movies for less money. Let's stop taking, but I would love I don't want to just vilify executives. I don't think it's interesting. It's more like, how can you incentivize people to start taking risks in their jobs, where they don't get penalized, they don't have to worry about getting fired for taking the shot. Kent Alterman is the one who started Broad City, took that risk, did Corporate, did so many great shows for comedy at Comedy Central when it was huge. Amy Schumer came out of that network. It's like, you can, when there's someone at the top who says, let's take the big swing, they're not all gonna be wins, but it's the law of averages, right?
But also within that too, the law of averages gets broken because the old system was 3/4 broadcast networks and a bunch of studios, right? That does not exist. That is T-Rex now. It's gone, right? The system is now subscriber based, streamers, and then the kind of the balance sheet, which is like, okay, we're gonna excuse me. Yes, I'm saying something I'm not allowed to say in public, so my voice is going. Then there's the balance sheet of we're gonna put it in theaters for X number of weeks, and then it's gonna move over to on demand, and then we're gonna make a crap load of money off all the people who have kids who never go to movies, and then we're gonna put it on a streamer. So there's all these different models. So when all of us talk about risk, I feel one thing that we need to also be real about is it's a different level of risk. Again, I think like when someone performs, your audience. You don't say hello Cleveland and Pittsburgh, right? And I think the same thing might be true. And I want to ask you guys individually, do you think that's true of the way the system works now? Because everyone says there is no real business model. I phone up this person, but they work for a streamer, but that streamer has to do the whole idea of what even constitutes risk, what even constitutes making a deal, is just it's whatever I say it is today.
I love how existential your question is. It's like, I feel like the next move is, who am I and where are we and what is this?
I'm going to pull out a copy of Nausea by Jean-Paul Sartre. Right? Where is that? Yeah, well, Brad, there was a snake in the metro. Where was that? Exactly.
Who am I?
But no, what do you think about that, though? I mean,
It's above my pay grade,
that
genuinely.
is so not true, Kiran.
Yeah,
No, not really, because you talked about the pipeline. So I guess what I ask is like, because you have to build your pipeline, right? But where does it go?
I mean, comedy specifically is a direct-to-ticket sale business. So we like it's like you're trying to reach your people, which you have to do through essentially the internet now, right? It's like you're building that market through the internet, and then I guess you're honing and refining. Like one thing I've thought is very interesting is like, so my algorithm, I don't like this is data. Oh my God, we're doing it. My algorithm, I don't think it matches. The algorithm is kind of set up. If you're a woman, you kind of automatically get more men, and if you're a man, you automatically get more women, like Matt Rife, right? He like just gets a ton of women. But my biggest fans are women, right? So I don't get served to my biggest fans.
There's an amazing book called Filter World, Filter Land, I believe. Have you read it? So it basically looks at algorithms.
Yes.
And it came out last year. It's a great book. If you get a chance to read it, please do. It's either Filter World or Filter Land, I apologize. And it talks about how algorithms are bullshit. Like because, and I'm going to use Elon's name, who I try to avoid saying, but if you and I have a social media outlet, and you and I have a political ideology, I walk into the office, tell the guys, I'm like, I want you to do some settings on the algorithm. Yeah. There's a reason extremists and more right-wing voices are showing up on X more. There's a reason why there are other voices being suppressed. So the algorithm never plays to your favor.
Right, and it's a friend of mine said this very early in the game, and I thought this is a fascinating point. He goes, even down to a dating app, there's always a perspective. Raya is about connecting with people exclusively. It's like this one is about connecting with your friends of friends. This one is connecting with hot people. So you're actually like infusing the values. You're infusing the values of the individual creating the thing into the user interface when we talk about these platforms as totally neutral. And I'm really excited to hear people start to talk a little bit more about like the ethics. I mean, obviously, because it's coming up in politics now, but like the ethics of how a platform is not, it's not a neutral, it's never been a neutral connector. It's always had a point of view just like a person does, just like an artist does.
Or just like in the old days of broadcast network, where CBS were more conservative.
Yes.
I just want to say,
You're so clever.
Nothing is above your pay grade, and you are way cleverer than anyone else.
Oh, that's very. Oh. You're going to give me a hug.
Pat, your turn.
Yeah, okay. I don't even remember the question, actually. It's a little too far for me. Look, my sense is, I'll answer maybe slightly different, which is, we talk about risk-taking in general, right? And, audio is a story incubator. You think about it that way. And so if you're in an environment where you're saying, I need $5 million to go do a picture or something, well, the cost of production, dev cycles, everything in audio is a lot faster and a lot cheaper. So if you're trying to convince a buyer, is it working, is it not working, et cetera, do it in audio first. Yeah. Come work with us. We're happy to do it, right? And so, and
Joseph's about to say, hey, my phone number is...
Yeah.
No, I was going to say, like, I mentor a lot of younger creatives, and I tell them it's so important to just put something out.
Yeah.
Right? Because I get pitched like 15 documentaries a week, and not everything has to be a documentary. It's really nuts. It's like, but if you want to tell this story, tell this story. It doesn't have to be a feature doc or a doc series. It could be an audio series. It could be a short film. It could be my friend does like animated PDFs, what do you call it? Like keynotes. And it's like, if you're a storyteller, there's ways to tell this story that aren't just feature documentary. And it's so important to just put something out. Yeah. Because not only does it become a calling card, right? And to see if there's an audience, but as a creative, it's really good feedback. You learn a lot about working on a thing and putting it in the world and seeing how people react to it.
Yeah, and it lends itself to franchising, multi-format storytelling, in a bunch of different ways. And so, when we start with an Audible original, we had a Canadian original, Mistletoe Murders, it went to Hallmark. It started on Audible, it was an Audible original.
Well, I was going to say, John, that because I love the discussion about pipelines, and I'm not just talking about oil and gas. But that does seem like, what do you think of that as like, well, this is a progressive model? And by progressive, I mean it goes one thing after another.
Well, that's what we love about the audio space. It's a chance to make something. And when everybody's not making something, the audio business seems to be growing. And what we love about that is that there's so many parameters in making movies and TV. Audio is so different. I mean, if you pitch something, if you start off in the film and TV world and say I have a period piece, you're going to get your door slammed in your face. Audio, it's a whole different story because of the budgets, they can do period. And that's what we love about that. And obviously, about making something is something very important. You're creating IP. And once you create that IP, yes, one goal is to take your audio series and try to make it into a film and TV show. But even if that doesn't happen, you still got to make something. And that's why all these content creators are coming to us to make more audio shows.
So, hypothetical. You have an audio show. It's on Audible. There's no celebrity attached, and it's I don't know. It's a topic that people don't immediately warm to. It's me talking about existential bullshit. Nobody's listening. but it is. It's someone who has a very specific story to tell, and they're telling it in a specific way. And it goes on with you guys, and you start to see some attention. So explain to me how the process then works going forward. I just always want to know the machinations, because I think that's news you can use, right? Like, oh, this is how I do it. So between both John and Pat, how does that work? It's on Audible. It started. Again, it's not Serial. It's not Brad Pitt on beauty products. Though he does do that. But, it's something like that. How does it go to a docuseries that Joseph might be interested in? Something like that. What's the process?
Well, with Yellowface, we started Yellowface as an audio podcast, doing the play as a show on Audible. And it was such an organic thing because we first got our deal with Audible, and everybody brought to us, we were talking about doing something. The first thing we wanted to do was Yellowface. And it happened so quickly. We recorded it. It actually got a lot of success. There was a lot of people. It was on like a lot of best of lists, and we were always.
It's really good.
Yeah. And what happened was,
it is really good.
We were also thinking, why don't we do this on Broadway? And because of the success, we didn't necessarily send the audio podcast to Broadway places, but since they heard of it and there was a lot of buzz on it, it was a lot easier to sell into a Broadway show. And it just happened very quickly. Within 1 year, Daniel was on Broadway doing the show.
Everyone take a sip.
And I'll answer slightly differently, which is, so what are we doing, right? So a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, we had the vision of saying, well, we're investing all this originals, we're marketing it, we're creating it, we're finding an audience for it. Is that it? The creators want to do more, we want to do more. And so how do we build a relationship with Prime Video? How do we think about using sort of the tentacles of Amazon to our benefit and to the creators' benefit? And I think Jackie's in the room, but we hired Jackie Levine, who's our head of film and TV.
Jackie,
there she is, who's doing an amazing job. Who spent the last year and a half. And by the way, I told her a million reasons not to take the job, and how this is going to be the hardest thing she's ever done in her life.
Working for you must be very weird.
Yeah,
don't work here.
It's a contradiction.
Got some ideas, but
it's a set of contradictions. But people understand sort of how the real world works, and so she's been creating all of these tentacles out in the industry to sort of say, let me be the advocate for Audible Originals and for these creators and these stories. And so it's a force multiplier, right?
So let me ask you again, because I love the machinations, right? So you have an Audible, a series we'll call, right? And you're working with these guys. You guys realize there's heat on this. There's attention to this, whatever. So how does it work in terms of ownership? What's her stake? What's your stake? Yeah. Because you're not gonna hey, Amazon, Jeff Bezos, we know you love free stuff. Have some more, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a negotiation. Everything's a negotiation, right? And there's a sense of both opportunities and challenges in every deal that we have to do. And so we try to work collaboratively. We're very clear up front about sort of how we want to work, what our intention is, what we're trying to do with the project, and then we try and work collaboratively to see where we get to. I mean, there's no sort of set hard and set rule on how we have to work with people. We do license deals, we do work for hire deals, we do a lot of things.
Joseph, sorry.
I just want to be like, say the number.
Yeah.
Say the number.
70-30, 70-30.
Yeah. Say the number, bro.
But even from a creative side, I think it's important for creatives to understand there's no template, right? There's no template. And so if you, as a creative, you should ask for what you think you want. Because,
Well, a lot of people, I think it was Amy Pascal who used to run Sony. And Amy Pascal, there was some, I can't remember what movie it was, but there was some movie that Jennifer Lawrence was in. And Jennifer Lawrence, clearly a big star, Oscar winner, Jennifer Lawrence found she was paid significantly less than her male co-star, which is a, I know that Joe Biden said the ERA is the law, but I think some people aren't saying that, and it's whatever. But that is an issue. Women make, I believe right now it's 87 cents to on the dollar to what men make. But Amy Pascal said this. She said, well, Jennifer Lawrence didn't ask for more money. It's not my job to give her more. If she's not going to ask for what, I'm using Bradley Cooper, but please, I'm just saying that because I know they've been in a bunch of movies together. Bradley asked for this, she asked for that. I gave Bradley what he wanted, and I gave Amy what she wanted. She just didn't ask. And I think that's also an internal syndrome that people have.
yeah, it is. And I think, it's also everyone has a different calculus for themselves, right? Like I took less money on Summer of Soul than I probably should have, but I did it because I never had a feature doc out in the world. I wanted to make one so I could show what I could do. And, that was my calculus. And I think, but, with these Audible deals, and especially with these new sort of mechanisms for distribution and getting your story out there, I think it's important that creators realize there's no template. If you want more upfront money and less back-end money, or if you want to claim your IP and just do a licensing deal, you have every right to ask for that. Because I think sometimes creatives get intimidated by the business aspect. They get served a contract and they're like, oh, I guess this is the deal I'm going to take, right? And I think everyone has to know, like, this is the wild, wild west, and there are no rules. So if you think you're worth X, you should ask for X. Or if, back end is more important to you because you believe in the idea, then do that. I think it's also having good advisors on your team, and don't be afraid to ask for help.
I will say that if you do that as a woman, as a pretty outspoken woman, you can be seen quite easily as difficult. Like that is I do think that's
a very real thing.
I think it's a very real thing. Like even when Amy Pascal says, why didn't Jennifer Lawrence ask for more money? It's like, that's a mind-blowing quote, It's like, why didn't I give you your fair share? Like when you should have asked for your fair share. It's like the onus is not on the person, the onus is on the system, to be fair. I think the more interesting point when it comes to women is whenever I get very angry about, which is all the time, whenever I get...
Why do I get touched for that?
Yeah, whenever I get...
I'm glad that was me.
I look at everyone's, I'm like, Dominic, John, Joseph, Pat. It's like when I get very angry, the thing that I do remind myself, and I remind myself this internally, and maybe this will be helpful for some of you too, in the times that I have gotten paid less, and it's like, and when I got paid less, it was like we knew, it was the same agent and manager who negotiated it. It was like, it was a situation where I didn't have the leverage. And are you gonna let everything bad ruin everything good in a scenario? There's so much that's good. Focus on what's good. Remember, it's the project for right now to get you to the next thing. And also, people pay less because it is financially advantageous to them. Like that is the big reason. It's not that women are worth less. It's like if Jennifer Lawrence is making 88 cents on the dollar and every A-list actress is making, that's great. Think about the savings. If you're a studio, that's 20% less for like a net profit. And so there is a little bit of an onus on us as a populace, I think, to make it so that that is such a shamed behavior that it's not worth doing it anymore, so that the cost outweighs the cost outweighs the benefit. I think that's functionally how that changes, because I just think the savings are too big. I think that's true for a lot of it. Just comes down to like, bottom line. I was on a Crooked Media podcast, one called Hysteria, it debuted at #1. And one of the things I will say, again, a very well-resourced network. I mean, they debuted at #1, but it was because they were able to push, pipeline-wise, able to push a lot of ads forward, use the nameplate, et cetera. So it's very exciting that you guys are going to be doing that, and we will all be holding you to it for new creative talent,
There is no way that anyone could follow that. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you, Kiran. Thank you, Pat. Thank you, John. Thank you, Joseph. Have a great Sundance, everyone.